1949 saw one of history's greatest, most terrible exoduses. After the communists gained victory on the mainland, there were over 1 million Chinese who made the journey across the strait to Taiwan. Among these people were some of the great masters of martial arts.
The Taiwan History Podcast, Formosa Files, is made possible through the generous sponsorship of the Frank C. Chen Foundation. Formosa Files.
Today we're looking at a story of transmission of Chinese martial arts to a Taiwanese family, the Hong family of Taipei. In particular, one great master called Hong Yixiang. And I'm talking to Chris Bates about this great master. He's translated a book called Blurred Boundaries, A Martial Arts Legacy and the Shaping of Taiwan. It's written by Hong Yixiang's son, one of his sons, Hong Sahan. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, John.
So what was special about the Hong family?
Well, the Hong family was a merchant family on Dihua Street in Taipei, in Old Taipei. And what that means is they were sort of in the Times Square, the prosperous district of Taipei at the time that the retrocession, Taiwan's return to mainland China occurred. They were a Taiwanese family, that is to say they weren't from mainland China. They were born and raised in Taiwan. The patriarch of the family, Hong Wufan, had been an orphan and had really pulled himself up by the bootstraps. Being a merchant family in Dihua Street, they were manufacturers of candles. They were the largest manufacturer in northern Taiwan of candles. Being successful and profitable, they attracted the attention of the underworld who wanted a slice or a cut. So what was unique was that they invited mainland Chinese masters who were arriving in Taiwan and were destitute. They had nothing but the clothes on their back, usually, plus the skills they had brought with them. They invited these masters in to work at the factory, to work as guards, and to train the sons of the patriarch. He had 5 sons in their martial art. So again, something that was unique is that in Taiwan at the time, Taiwanese martial arts were largely focused on Southern Shaolin styles like White Crane and were expressed and trained largely in training halls that did things like lion dance and dragon dance. Otherwise, they were associated with the underworld.
So the mainlanders who are staying with the Hongs are teaching them quite new forms, at least for Taiwan. Now, that's special in itself, but just the fact that you have Chinese teaching Taiwanese at that time, wow. I mean, the martial arts in China are secretive enough, but here you have two populations that were quite antagonistic. In 1947, we had the 228 incident and subsequent what we could call the March massacres. Thousands of people killed. An uprising by the Taiwanese against the new nationalist government and suppressed brutally. So there was not much love between these incoming Chinese and the local Taiwanese.
Right. And the stress that you're going to have whenever an exodus, a population which is retreating, moves in and tries to share the bedroom with another population that's there already, resources become constrained. A lot of society is turned upside down.
And there weren't many resources to go around. I mean, Taiwan was brutally poor in those post-war years.
And that plays into some of the story that Hong Zahan shares in the book is that gangsters and the underworld and corrupt people see such momentous periods of change or periods of momentous change as opportunities to exploit, insert themselves in between resources and the people who need them. And that very much plays into, the first half of the book when the Hong family is trying to deal with growing their business and with rapacious gangsters who want a cut of it.
Yes, it's absolutely fascinating. And it's different from our, perhaps coming from movies, conception of gangsters. A lot of this is sort of low-level protection rackets, you might say, often associated with temples.
Yes.
Sort of low-level temple gangsters who just collect donations from the neighborhood. Some of the people who are in these line dance troops or who are doing the different processions, they're sort of like, I don't know, what do you call them, bums? They don't have regular jobs. I don't know.
Rascals.
Rascals. Okay. And one of my favorite scenes in the book early on involves some of the things we've just talked about.
Indeed. The temple, the people who would prepare the parades on an annual basis would come to the Dihua merchants with their hands out and ask for donations in order to make it a grand celebration and a grand procession. And sometimes they would come more than once, and sometimes they would come more than thrice. And the sons in the Hong family, they were young and hot-blooded, and they got unhappy about how their dad was accommodating these rascals. And they set about with this secret plot. In addition to manufacturing candles, they were also a major wholesaler of fireworks. And of course, fireworks are very much closely attached to pageantry and temples and so on in Taiwan too.
They're coming up to Lantern Festival, is it? There's a special...
There's the blasting the god of pestilence. Once a year, on the 15th day of the first month of the lunar calendar, there's the barrage on the god of pestilence. They want to discourage the god of pestilence from his activities during the year, and so they blast him away symbolically. Now, this is done by spiritistas, or in danki in Taiwanese, these people who are taken over by the spirits of gods.
Trance mediums, maybe?
Trance mediums, correct. I use the word spiritista because it's a lot Spanish-Filipino, but it's the same idea, and it's accessible to Westerners, I think. But they're trance mediums. They channel spirits, and this supposedly makes them invulnerable to injury. So they go into a trance, and they are paraded down the street, bare shirt, bare-chested, with the Taoist master has written on their body Chinese characters with his finger, these again to protect them from harm, as they channel the spirit of the god of pestilence, who's going to be driven away and cast away. So the young members of the Hong family, and when I say young, they're in their 20s at this point in time, but they're behaving like teenagers. They're behaving like teenagers. And I talked to Zahan about that. And he says, Taiwanese, we mature a little late.
Okay.
But they plot to give a drubbing to these rascals. Right. And they look at their various, their armory of different kinds of fireworks and try to decide what kind of fireworks can they throw at these guys that are going to get their point across.
Oh, it's great. In the book, you've got the different kinds. There are dancing fireworks, rat fireworks, great dragon fireworks, and
flower tubes, things like that.
They're sitting around saying, oh, we'll use that. And another brother will say, no, that's not useful. We'll have this.
That one we might hurt the audience. And the whole point is that during the actual procession, and it still is done today, and you can see pictures of it online, the people are allowed to throw fireworks at these trance mediums. And the trance mediums have a fan, and some of them they knock away with the fan, and some of them hit the body and they just bounce off. But it's very lively, it's loud, it's now exactly what Taiwanese love, hot and raucous. That's how it normally works, okay? But the sons, they want to teach these guys a lesson. And they think, and some of the fireworks are too big. Some of the fireworks might pose a danger to the audience, and they one by one eliminate them. And finally, Hong Yixiang, the fourth son, says, "Well, why don't we wrap up these smaller fireworks in rice paste, a glutinous rice paste? And when we chuck them at these guys, they're going to stick." And they decide to do that. The result is that when the parade comes in front of their shop, which is one of the two main places where the parade stops and allows people to chuck the fireworks at people, they're throwing these at them. And it says in the book, although the trance mediums were able to swat away the bullets flying in from all directions with their cattail leaf fans, these specially fabricated rats could not be dislodged once they stuck, until one by one, the spirit mediums all looked like porcupines with fireworks hanging on them. According to the length of the fuse, these would explode, sometimes one detonating another. The spirit mediums, for whom the magic signs had not been written deeply enough, were the first to be awakened from their trances. Those for whom the guardian spirit had already departed their bodies now writhed to the tempo of the explosions on their skin, energetically concealing the scalding and pain from the explosion of the fireworks plastered to their bodies. No one in the audience watching this spectacle could fathom why the spirit mediums this year were so intensely energetic in their performance. Only that this year's blasting away pestilence was exhilarating, truly a marvel to watch. And they all believed to the bottom of their hearts to have given the god of pestilence such a drubbing. This year is certainly going to be prosperous and fine. Mission accomplished.
Yes. Just a reminder that these temple processions were a bit of a squeeze on the local community, and for protection and also from interest is why the Hong family would bring in these mainlanders, have them work as guards, and have them teach the sons.
Indeed.
And over time, is it the fourth son?
The fourth son, Hong Yixiang, yes.
He would become the great master of internal martial arts in Taiwan.
That's right.
Can you try to explain internal martial arts?
Very simply, and this description would be taken to task by people who train a lot, but Shaolin martial arts, so-called external martial arts, will rely on the development, the conditioning of muscle and bone, and they're what are also known as hard styles of martial arts. Internal arts rely much more on relaxation, the development of tenacious energy and strength through, it's not purely muscular and bone energy, but stickiness and power through relaxation, what we might also call whole body power. So these are arts that had not been cultivated or transmitted in Taiwan very much at that time. Many of them evolved from northern China. So they were new and interesting and to be trained in by a Taiwanese family. And there is a funny scene early on when the Hong sons are training in Taiji. Taiji, of course, being this slow, meditative training, trying to deeply relax and so forth. But these are young, energetic men. And they're all struggling in their minds as they go through this slow dance. What the hell am I doing here? What can this even be used? But eventually they learn to understand its power and the power of its yielding and softness. And Taiji only being one of the three internal martial arts that they eventually trained. The other two being xingyiquan, the form and intent boxing, and baguazhang, the art based on the 8 trigrams, the bagua, and change inherent within, expressed by the bagua.
Some listeners might be thinking, well, these internal arts sound quite poetic and abstract, but not that practical. But not the case. Hong Yixiang was so practical in his application of his fighting skills that he was sought out by the American military and the American intelligence here.
Yes. Firstly, when the CIA agent Robert Smith came to Taiwan around 1958, he had trained in Western wrestling and Western boxing and extensively in judo. And when he came to Taiwan, besides his core mission of training Chinese, Taiwanese frogmen to infiltrate the mainland, he also was personally interested in learning Chinese martial art. And his book, Chinese Boxing Masters and Methods, became sort of a menu for me when I came to Taiwan. But the first chapter of that book is devoted to Hong Yixiang, which was the first local teacher he trained with.
He describes him as a bit of a wild man, a bruiser.
Yeah, I mean, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but Hong Yixiang, not somebody you invite over for a learned conversation over tea, but somebody you'd want to have watching your back in a brawl. Yeah. I mean, I found Hong to be a lot more cultured than that. But at the time, Hong drank, he smoked, and Smith talks about how, the roughest days were the ones when he came in with alcohol on his breath because the punches were less controlled, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, Smith led to that training, eventually led when the U.S. became involved in Vietnam and had a large presence in Taiwan that were also pairing or staying here in their preparation to go to Vietnam. That led to Master Hong becoming a master or a coach teaching U.S. GIs on their way there. And this forced him to rethink the training. He wanted to impart skills that were practical, but something that they could learn to do within a relatively short period of time because they were only here for months, not years. And he did crystallize some of these internal martial arts principles into training routines that would then be practiced repeatedly against multiple opponents until they were ingrained into muscle memory.
So this is unarmed fighting.
Unarmed fighting, correct, yeah. Some of these GIs went to Vietnam, survived their tours, and came back to Taiwan and presented Master Hong with a plaque to thank him for the skills that they had given them that had helped them to survive. Also, he returned, in a sense, he wanted to honor these GIs that were going off to fight in war, and arranged for his local students, many of whom were also the sons of Dihua street merchants, to arrange a banquet for them.
Oh, I love that chapter. I mean, it's an example of the book being about Taiwanese culture, all the details of the food and the preparation for that banquet. Yes.
Indeed. I mean, food is such an essential element of Chinese culture, and the availability of food to the extent that a proper greeting in Taiwanese or Mandarin, li jia ba bui, or ni chi bao le, is have you eaten your fill? The presumption being that if you have eaten that day, that it's a good day. Also, the presumption that in many cases in the past, people would not have had a meal that day. So, yeah, food is very central. And to prepare the bounty that was put into this banquet, is the author goes into quite some detail about it. Hong Yixiang puts together a menu of dishes, and they do a first run, a trial run that he cooks, but then they bring in obviously the chefs to do the final thing. But the students were all contributing to the bounty of this banquet. And a reminder that this is a banquet being prepared for American GIs going off to war. So we had one of the students bringing in the big black sea cucumbers and sea cucumber intestines, which was
sea cucumber intestines.
Yeah, this is a rare delicacy among the common people. And another fellow harbor uncle offered up the wild deep ocean pomfrets and prawns. We had people delivering shark skin. Another fellow who was contributing Muscovy ducks that are raised in Danshui. And he devotes a part of a chapter just to those ducks and why they were considered particularly good. And then he goes into some detail on how these foods are made or how these dishes are prepared. One thing they realized when Hong Yixiang was trying to make the test dinner for his guests, they wanted to get the menu set right, and he was doing the cooking. They didn't have enough table space, counter preparation space, so they dismantled 2 doors from their house and carried the doors over to the place where the school next door where they were going to use the auditorium.
Yeah, so the book is so full of fun details like that, so evocative of 1950s and 60s Taiwan. And yeah, so many wonderful stories in this book. It's my favorite recent book on Taiwan. It just has a richness that you can't find in the great majority of books.
It's a very different kind of book. It's not just a history, and it's certainly not a martial arts book per se, but martial arts is a part of Chinese culture. And this book is a deep dive into many facets of Chinese culture and Taiwanese culture and the mix of those cultures as they had to blend together after the exodus from mainland China.
Yes. I mean, there's such a variety of content too. So, you've got the food we've just been talking about, obviously martial arts, and some, really exciting stuff like Master Hong going up to the mountains to learn deadly arts from who?
from an assassin, someone from mainland China his job had been to assassinate political opponents. And when they come to Taiwan, they have, we see this is played out in many movies, Western movies. Once you reach a certain point, you become a liability. And so he has retreated deep into the mountains where he's not going to be found.
We won't give too much away. We will let readers read that for themselves. So you've got assassins and dark arts. And then you have very, very moving passages. There's a lovely exchange between Hong Yixiang and a mainlander woman.
Yes.
Involving a lunchbox, if I remember correctly.
Indeed. One day, Master Hong is returning from collecting debts and on the train, and he has a box of lunchbox sushi that he had bought on the train. And he's walking through the streets of Taipei, and he sees from a distance an exchange between a mainland Chinese woman who's got a baby on her back, and she's holding the hand of her son walking down the street, and they've stopped at a street stall to buy food. And the vendor is willing to accommodate them, and she takes her order. But a Taiwanese man comes up from outside and accosts the vendor and tells him he shouldn't be selling to these mainland Chinese people. They're just leeches, and they're living off destroying our economy, et cetera. He doesn't go into that detail, but that's the point. And the vendor is sort of not sure what to do. And the woman, the mother, backs away and says, no, it's okay. Don't bother. And she walks away without her food. And Master Hung sees this take place. He doesn't interject himself into the conflict, but he follows her a bit and then blocks her path and just gives her the box of sushi that he had. And he said, don't let the little guy go hungry. But then he adds, and I'm always touched by this, he adds that the man that had accosted her on the street said he's not a bad guy. He's hurting too. And that's the situation then. I mean, life was tough. People were hurting, and survival was not easy. For him to have tried to help out in this way without causing greater tension and conflict by, inserting himself immediately into the argument and berating the guy who was complaining in the first place is the kind of thing that he would do later on. I mean, he'd try to solve problems without immediate direct confrontation or taking an indirect approach.
So this episode would be from the 1950s.
I would say it's, 49, early 50s, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When things were really tough.
Yeah. His master, Zhang Junfeng, who had been a merchant a wholesaler of fruits from Shandong and Qingdao, he came to Taiwan a number of times before the Exodus, but then he got stuck in Taiwan. He initially turned down, offers of assistance from the Hong family and was living out in a shack in eastern Taipei, which at that time was just open fields and stuff. And they were living in a shack, he and a couple of other Shandong buddies. And the typhoon came and hit and just completely destroyed everything that they had been trying to put together for themselves. So at that point, he accepted the offer from the Hongs to take their assistance. And they put him up in a place, and he started training the Hong brothers. And this was the teacher who really brought them forward in their skills in internal arts. They had a Taiji teacher before, but Zhang Junfeng was skilled in xingyi and baguazhang, both of which are a bit more direct and energetic than Taiji, and are good foundations or gateways into Taiji mastery. So Zhang Junfeng became their first big teacher. He, with the Hong family assistance and with the assistance of other students, then set up a proper school, and that grew and became prominent. Along the way, Master Hong accepted some challenges on behalf of the master, which are detailed in the book. And eventually, Hong Yixiang then, set up his own expression of the art.
And you trained under him in the 80s. Now, we did an episode before on martial arts in Taiwan and looked at your time here.
Yes. When I first came, I didn't train with Hong Yixiang. I trained with Gao Fangxian, but Master Gao passed away, and I was looking for a teacher to train with, and I began my training with Master Hong around the end of 1982, early 1983.
So you trained with Hong Yixiang and his sons, and you became a family friend.
Yes, I hope so. I think so. I still am visiting the three sons, Hong Zehan and his older brother Hong Zezhou and his younger brother Hong Zepei. But my main training now is with Hong Zehan, the middle son, who wrote Blurred Boundaries.
You translated it for them and did a wonderful job. And
thank you. Yeah, it was a work of love.
Excellent, excellent. So just to wrap up, I would say that this book is great for a wide variety of people. Those interested in post-war Taiwan, or those interested in martial arts, whether just a little or a lot, for those really deep into martial arts, I think you've scattered quite a few Easter eggs through this book.
Absolutely.
Zihan, Hong San
Zihan
has.
has, yes.
As always, it's been great talking to you, Chris.
Thank you, John. I enjoyed our conversations, and yeah, this book is something I hope readers will enjoy.
Informative and enjoyable.